see if that could solve the problem.
Interesting. So crypto. Amir, what do you see? Do you see adoption? Can you speak in numbers?
I mean, in the in-app world, it's still, there's no standard yet. I mean, it's in the works, so we're probably going to see it coming out at some point. I think, but in general, it's about the implementation. How will companies actually implement that? I mean, all the issues that we've heard here. With a good implementation, it could be a great solution. With a bad implementation and with bad management of the ads.txt file, it's a disaster. Yeah, you want to protect against fraud. You want to protect against, the same impression changing 10 hands just to end up with someone who could have bought it directly. But also, you don't want to hurt the yield, right? So you want to make sure that the management is good enough so you get a good yield and you overcome all the fraud and the brokerage issues that you've mentioned. But in-app, it still remains to be seen how, I'm sure it will come, but it still remains to be seen how exactly it will be implemented.
And do you see a shift of budgets, or you see an increase that can be attributed because people are kind of moving away from, I guess, desktop and mobile web to apps?
Yeah, so we definitely see that. People that are struggling, companies that are struggling with how to deal with ads, DXT, we see it from the demand side, of course. So they do see it as a route to a business model that they're more familiar with. But I do believe that it's a short-term, it's an intermediate situation where it's going to be resolved at some point also for in-app, and it will clear up.
Got it. Bill, what's your take?
Can you hear me, Ariel? Good. Our take is that it's a good thing for the marketplace. It's driving more transparency. Yes, it is a ton of work from a DSP perspective, from a publisher perspective. But ultimately, what it's trying to get to is to just a clearer way to allow buyers to buy the inventory that their clients wish them to buy. So I think there's a lot of pressure coming from DBM in terms of this being pushed out, being rolled out, and I don't know if anyone from Google was in the room here, but it's a good initiative. But obviously, DBM are type of really pushing this one quite hard, and then the other DSPs having to follow. But I would think from the publisher side also, those that have obviously got the ads.txt on their sites and working with relevant resellers can therefore make sure they're working in a clearer environment. It's stopping spoofing, but I think if it's already happened, I wouldn't be surprised if there's already ads.txt being spoofed. So we've got to put in more technology to understand what that is. But that will clear up the spoofing side of the marketplace of publishers just not knowing necessarily, or illegal type of sales of spoofed sites. And so they'll consolidate some of the spend, but ultimately allow clients to determine better where their money's being spent, which is a good thing. So the quality demand will buy the quality supply. It will create some scarcity, and it will also shake out part of the long tail.
And do you see a difference between your, let's say, mid-tier publishers and small publishers versus the big ones?
Yeah, I mean, some of the smaller publishers have obviously struggled a little bit, I think, in terms of having the dev resource to make sure that they can first of all get it on, and talking about spelling mistakes, and that doesn't help at all, but I think they'll have to get there, that'll force that. I think what it does do, from a publisher perspective, it also makes sure that they're very clear who is actually selling all of their inventory. So in a lot of regions we work in, there are sales houses, which are absolutely fine. Some of them are not. We have direct relationships. But there are quite a few then where sales houses have then relationships with other sales houses, and other sales houses, and then reseller, and there are so many hops that unless that is clear in terms of the whole supply chain, that needs to be cleaned out, and I think ads.txt will help with that. And as I say, there will be a shake out of the long tail because of that.
Perfect. And you were talking about hops and supply chain, and I think that leads us to our next question, which is path optimization. And in the past year, we've seen technologies for demand path optimization, supply path optimization. We're seeing this as kind of a reaction to the whole header bidding effect, where so much inventory, so much traffic is being broadcasted to the DSPs. How do you think this will, HILIT, how do you think this will affect the value chain in 2018?
So, there is a need to overcome all this noise and all the clutter that there is, and I think the DSPs are taking different strategies in order to overcome that. Some DSPs are using basic rule engine or random throttling, which both of those strategies can definitely reduce the QPS, but it doesn't help them to make the better decision in order to take that bid they need in order to win. There's more sophisticated DSPs and SSPs that have their own departments of machine learning now. And you see that they're using machine learning in order to get to a more transparent or quality traffic, and SSPs that use the machine learning in order to divert the traffic to the DSPs that they think would win. However, I think that both of those, DPO and SPO, are only taken from the side of the players, so they're not seeing the entire market when they're taking those decisions, and this is what we at CORE thought that is needed for a much more deep understanding. We're seeing different DSPs and understanding each of those DSPs' purchase pattern, and also we're seeing all the SSPs and listening and understanding the quality. So I think that when we speak about supply path optimization, we definitely need to speak about the full value chain and to work with an end-to-end system that can find those paths that would be the shortest and the clean, much more efficient, and increase the ROI to all the players, and let the DSPs and SSPs, focus on their business.
Got it. Bill, what do you think? What do you think?
No, it's fine. So I think if we go back 18 months, 2 years, we're constantly being asked by demand what unique supply we had, and now supplier asking what unique demand we have, and it goes round and round in circles, really. I think really it comes down to the transparency question in terms of who has access to what rights. When demand is asking us what exclusive supply we have, from a PubMatic perspective, we'd love to work just exclusively as the only SSP with publishers. Ultimately, I think moving forward, there will be fewer people in the chain as people into header bidding and wrapper. Then they're starting to waterfall wrappers now almost. It's pointless, and again, it has issues on the DSP side. So the fewer players that are in play really there in terms of this, going from the client's money to identifying the end user on a supplier's site will be better, because that just reduces the confusion. So SPO is, I think, just another step in terms of getting people to that place, and for publishers really to try and, well, not to try, but should be asking their suppliers, what service do you actually add uniquely that I'm not maybe getting from other people? I think you touched upon in terms of type of ad tech type of tax, in terms of what is that, who's providing what. And I think if suppliers can't answer the question in terms of what they do, what their technology does, what their people do, then they're obviously not adding value. And so therefore that, I think, will again shake out the number of suppliers, and therefore demand will be able to identify the quality supply through the relevant technologies. So I think SPO is just another step towards getting to fuller transparency.
So it's another technological aspect, I guess, to the whole cleanup, or
I think technology, and also
shortening the path.
Yeah, and just asking the questions as to, you have access to that supply, what actually are you doing for that supply? Do you actually have rights to that supply? And all those are very valid questions to be asked.
SEMION, what do you think?
Supply chain is a very important part of the decision making. I do believe the optimization of supply chains happen all the time and will be much more significant. Supply chain from the business aspect to decide to whom, what, when, exclusive, first look or not, as well as technology. From technology point of view, there's a lot of changes, and sometimes not publishers can tell you what to optimize because it doesn't understand clearly the picture by itself. When we're making due diligence in low level to understand what exactly happened, it's each time different KPIs that have a significant impact. If it's latency, it's the region of the house servers of the demand partner or supply partner. It's actually where's end user at that moment. What kind of data you have? More and more companies in the supply chain using third-party technology. Each party technology take additional latency time, and as a result, latency have a negative impact on the revenue. So making considerations, learning from machine learning what are the main KPIs in each time, making a identification based on this KPI, making decision in real time on flow of supply chain, exactly the same flow as we decide to whom to send the demand partners, how to send, in which pack, directly, indirectly. So more time is coming by, we detect more and more KPIs that have significant impact on the results, and based on it, you're making decisions.
Okay. AMIR, maybe from the mobile side? Is
Yeah,
this
so
happening?
for us, if I put, for us, for practical terms, the supply chain management for us is deciding on which exchanges we're going to actually connect to, and given the exchanges we're connected to, which publishers should we be buying from these several exchanges, right? So I think it's definitely going to make us more selective around which exchanges we're going to integrate with. We want to make sure that we're not just hooking in another exchange that's going to pretty much give us the same impressions that we've seen other places. And this is actually maybe a simpler question because it's yes or no. It's relatively an easy answer. I think it's getting more complicated when you have several exchanges and you have the same publisher sending maybe different placements across different, and you have to start being smart about it and realizing, are these the same impressions? Should I stop buying them from one channel or not? And this will be an area that we're going to have to invest if we want to keep our costs reasonable. Otherwise, it's just going to go up.
I would like to add something. Indeed, the question is simply yes or no. But then, if you want to take the other actions, you have to ask why. And then, when you make the research why, you identify it more and more KPIs that have impact. So even the answer is yes, no, it's always have to ask why to understand what's happened, and then you can provide unique solutions for the market needs, current market needs.
I completely agree, and I think one thing to remember, it is a video show. We're talking about video. Video is always more complex than its display counterpart. And from what we're seeing in the market, the ability to control where the impression originates and then direct where you can find the optimal demand, and the vice versa, allow that demand to track an impression all the way to the player is a great strength. And I think we're all trying to solve the same problem from different directions, from a business side, ads.txt, or governance, this way or another, of who sells what to whom. And from a technology side, predictive technology, optimization, and direct-to-player technology helps us a lot there.
And I think it's kind of interesting because the two sides where you have ads.txt on one side, I mean, maybe I'm oversimplifying this, but ads.txt on one side and header bidding on the other side, assuming you're not very careful about how you implement it. The one that just encourages introducing more and more impressions from the same publishers. The other one is actually going the other way around. You're actually restricting the amount that you're actually sending and selected. So it's kind of, I think that, as always, we're trying to find the balance of what actually is a good mix.
Good. Let me touch on another mobile issue here before we end up. Mobile is becoming rapidly, we're becoming rapidly a mobile-first world, right? Mobile is becoming the go-to device, also for video. And I'm directing this to you, Amir. How do you see video changing this year on the mobile front? In terms of formats, in terms of usage?
Yeah, so I think it's not only mobile, but it's also important to distinguish between mobile web and mobile in-app. So I think that at least what we've seen is that the transition is not only from desktop to mobile, but also a lot more traction in the mobile in-app. I mean, it's not surprising. What you can expect seeing is that it's a small screen. So video formats that work well on mobile are going to take over the entire screen typically. I mean, again, you still have, of course, if you're looking on Google and YouTube, of course, is always running on mobile, so you'll still have the pre-rolls and etc. But we also see an increase in the interstitials. If it's for mobile phones, it's typically 320 by 480 or vice versa, 1024 by 768. And then you also have native video that is getting some traction. You have MRAIDs, you have rewarded video that is more geared towards performance type of campaigns. But I think, as I mentioned at the beginning, I think that what we see, at least from the traffic coming in, that more and more traffic is coming online. And what we look to see is, I think that in-app was more looked at from a performance standpoint until today, of course for mobile apps, etc. But we think that increasingly you're going to see the brand advertisers, etc., taking this more and more seriously, but just because they have no option. The media is just moving there and people are spending more time there. So it'll be interesting.
So brand advertising on mobile, video. That's the big news. Excellent. Bill, do you have anything to add on that?
Nothing about. I think we're seeing brand money moving more into just general all formats. So yeah, that is happening. We're seeing more and more of that. I think when you just look at generally most of the formats in mobile, whether it be mobile video, it hasn't really been brilliant creative. And I think there's more pressure coming from clients in terms of making sure that the creatives are being thought about. I mean, the whole evolution really, if you go through type of digital, type of just advertising, online advertising, has not been very creative, nor is the way of really buying it as well. So I think there's going to be increased pressure on making sure that, again, the end user, you, me, people who use screens actually have an enjoyable experience. And I don't think that's necessarily been, I don't think necessarily buyers have been forced to think about that a great deal. I think that's going to be something that changes a lot next year in terms of, next year? Yeah, we're still 2017. A lot in terms of how then the user experience is thought about within the environment. And again, that can only help the video as well, because I think that's going to be a far more creative ad format that used properly, again, will help drive CPMs, whichever cost of engagement is used.
Great. SEMION?
Totally agree with the guys. I would like to add there's new trends that we see in the market, more demand for OTT, smart TV, the checks for VR, AR, possible video standards. It's not set yet, but more the company this year developing the solution, so we're part of define this POC. We see more and more big cable companies looking for the targeted solution based off the end user, and less the general approach that you have right now, the one video ad for all the audience. So instead of targeting video ads inside big broadcast, it's also the next step that we see next year.
Great. So I think some of you are touching on a bit of predictions for 2018, which leads us to our final question. It's really been an exciting year in terms of the programmatic ecosystem for video. A lot of changes. What do you feel is going to shape up 2018? What are the top 1 or 2 trends that you're seeing that are going to make a difference? And Bill, maybe we'll start with you.
First of all, I think there's going to be a lot of consolidation moving into next year. So I think we're going to see fewer players in the marketplace. I think transparency, technology, more client involvement in terms of where their money is being spent will force that. So that's no bad thing. I do think we're going to see more money moving into video. And again, that comes down to the formats and people thinking more creatively in terms of what works in that space at that time for the right user. So again, that does require technology. And I think we'll see, again, more money moving into programmatic, and a lot of that money will be brand money as opposed to, discussed earlier, performance. And we're already beginning to see that.
Excellent. HILIT, what do you think?
So definitely transparency is going to be a much bigger factor this year. I think that we'll see more and more technologies that are allowing the value chain to be much more efficient. I think that at the end of the day, you know, the DSPs and the SSPs and the whole ecosystem needs to take all those great initiatives and start moving in order to clean that environment.
SEMION?
I believe the next steps will be data, big data, and data-driven decision making. We do see the company succeeds making more machine learning, more decision making. So I do believe the data will be used in several layers for traffic validations, for DMP, for targeting, retargeting. So I believe next year will be the use of big data of EdTech in more parts on the supply chain decision making.
AMIR?
Yeah, I totally agree with the last point. I think that data-driven media buying is going to be big. Tighter integration with what we've traditionally seen as kind of the MarTech areas. Companies importing data, expect to see DSPs and targeting these user tracking performance far beyond what they've done until today. Of course, they'll demand that everything is going to be clean and transparent. This is, I think we're getting to a point where it's like a given, but I think there's going to be a lot more emphasis on are you driving results? Are we seeing the KPIs that we're trying to hit? And they're going to actually look at which channels are actually able to provide them with these, are able to hit those KPIs better than others. I think there's going to be a lot more push on the media buying channels to show that can actually do better than others, rather than just race to the lowest CPMs and buying impressions.
Interesting. So we're kind of aggregating what I'm hearing here. It's going to be a healthier, cleaner, shorter value chain. We're going to see a lot of consolidation in the industry. Still, video is going to grow. We'll see both brand and performance flowing in. Mobile is probably going to grow much more. And from our perspective, we're definitely seeing a crunch on transactional efficiency. That's still going to be a major issue, whether it be supply path optimization or header bidding or unified yield. And I think at the end of that game, we still see publishers as a source of, I wouldn't say vulnerability, but they're the weakest link, because a lot of the burden they have to carry, implementing technologies, updating as.txt file, choosing who to sell to, and applying formats. So it's going to be a very interesting year also from the publisher front. So with that, I'd like to thank you all. It's been a great panel, and thank you for listening. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.